Okay, we're here with Victor Swatsek, writer, author. Victor, what inspires you to write?
Well, almost everybody told me that, write about what you know. And I wrote my first book watching a couple different shows on the History Channel. And in my past business life, I would typically pick up real easy, real quick, how things should go work together, okay? I spent a lot of time putting together what I consider major proposals that were not so much the costing of it, rather than how we're going to do it. So using that as a style, having twists and turns when you have to run across 5 or 6 different departments and have to know each of those, it becomes real handy, especially if you have to go back and start over because of a process. So into me knowing that has helped me a tremendous amount.
Another question for you. What would you say is your writing style?
Well, it's difficult to say that because I think I'm best suited to write novels that are basically fictitious in size, because you can then allude to almost anything. I mean, science fiction is the perfect example of being able to just, anything is believable, okay? I like to write my stories where they are not just situated in one city or one town. I like them to travel between states, maybe even across the oceans. So my stories all it's a global story. And each of the books tells a global story, where between the friends that Walter, as an example, has picked up over the years through the concentration camp times, as well as in his times today, in his financial side where he buys companies, he uses those connections as part of the business. And so consequently, it makes it that much more fun and exciting, where you're talking about what happens in Florence, Italy, versus what happens in Garmisch or Kitzing in Germany, what happens in Las Vegas. And people at one time have all heard of these cities or towns. And so now they can relate to that because, oh, yeah, I've been there, and they right away can visualize themselves, yeah, we had a good time there. We walked on a Ponte Vecchio bridge and bought my bracelet and da-da-da-da and things like that.
Walter is in both of your books, right?
He's going to be in all of them.
We'll get back to the books and I'll ask you about them, but tell me a little bit about Walter.
Well, Walter is actually an interesting individual. He is a master counterfeiter. He learned to paint when he was still over in Germany. And he learned by the best. And he got so good at it that he could actually duplicate and copy oil paintings, and nobody could ever tell a difference. The thing that he was missing out of this, he could not figure out how to age them. In other words, painting a duplicate copy is one thing, but if you want to create a real counterfeit that you can sell as maybe the real thing, that's a whole other process. And so he found an individual accidentally when he was leaving after the war that showed him those tricks of the trade.
Another question for you. Who or what influences your writing?
Well, I've been a big fan of Robert Ludlum. And Robert Ludlum, especially when I was in the service, by the way, I was in service over in Germany, so all those places that we talk about in Kitzingen and Würzburg, Salzburg, all those places I've been to while I was in the service over there. So Robert Ludlum was one that I started reading all the time. And then recently I started reading Dan Brown stuff because, it's just so fascinating. The Vatican and the whole Christianity thing was just fascinating. And then Steve Berry writes about the Knights of Templar and stuff like that. And so those are fascinating stories to me. And there again, they write about things that are real cities, real streets, which I like. And they may make up the story, but people can relate when they name a street that they've been on.
Do you have a favorite author? I know you named a couple there, but...
Probably Robert Ludlum is one of my favorites. And now that I'm writing real life, he is really one of my authors, and I'll tell you why. He had written, I believe it's 33 books. Okay, that he wrote 33 books, and of those, 16 became movies.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah,
That's probably an honor to see your book become a movie.
yeah. Well, I hope
see it
so.
on the screen.
Well, I hope so. It could at least be an HBO on TV.
Yeah. So what do you want your readers to take away from your books in a way of,
Well, I want them to take a sense of adventure, knowing that there are other worlds out there besides where you live and work. I also think of my 15 books library I'm writing about could be made into at least TV movie, okay? And I know that when you write, you cannot write as well as the movie would depict, okay? And so I typically have in there, all the normal things, the love and war and sex and killing and blowing up things, helicopter rides.
It's pretty neat. It's like theater of the mind in radio.
It's theater of the mind.
Theater of the mind. You
Theater
put
of the
a lot
mind.
that in there.
Okay. And I've sent my book out to several people. I'm still waiting for an answer, but nothing yet.
Well, you have a couple books. The Prague Deception. Can you tell me about that?
Well, that's where the story starts, where Walter, whose real name is Alfred Berger, was a counterfeit master. And while he did that very, very well, he then also learned how to make copies and forgeries of paintings that he could sell and make some money. He then traveled all the way down to Marseille, got on a tram steamer, and ended up in New Orleans. He had some of the pictures with him that he got from the guy that taught him all the nuances of making counterfeits. And from there, traveled to Rhode Island. And in Rhode Island, he started with a small piece of property way in the back of the hinterland back there. He started buying companies that were depressed companies.
Okay.
He had money. Some of it was counterfeits, but he mixed it in with the other stuff, and he did really, really well. He also built himself an estate that would rival the Rockefellers or the Mellons of their time, and slowly but surely started buying companies. At some point in time, he had to have somebody start helping him. Keeping in mind all this time, he really wants to be a really low profile because he doesn't want people to know who he is. So he's been buying companies slowly throughout the book.
Interesting.
He has a real head for making things happen, and nothing genius about it other than he'll buy a company, maybe lop off 10% of the head count, because that gives people incentive to start working a bit harder. And within a short period of time, he's now making money, okay? He likes to influence. He likes to get people reaching. He buys companies that hopefully will integrate and help themselves, okay?
Yeah.
You really have to read the first book to get it really drifted, because the first book does open a lot of things. It then explains a little bit more how Rick, the guy who kind of goes off and does all these wonderful things, and then Liz, who is his niece, they're not related to him. They are the sons and daughters of two of his closest friends that were in a concentration camp that he said he would help them with, okay? All this time, he doesn't tell them who they are, either together, separately, but the mother and the father are both living on his estate. One is the housekeeper and the cook. The other is the gatekeeper at the front, okay? And after the story is finally over, or somewhere in the middle, I guess, it finally has come out that Walter is going to have to finally tell him who he really is and who are they.
We're going to have to just get the book and find out what's going on from there on. Sounds like a really good book. You also have the Colorado Conspiracy. Now, you were saying before this interview that they go together. Well,
they go together only. See, Rick is really a teacher at Brown University, and he liked being a teacher, okay? He graduated with an engineering degree, and he taught European history. Really, that was his favorite thing. But he was also in the service. He got drafted because he wasn't married and all that time, and he went to OCS. He actually got stationed down in Zweibrücken, which is down on the French border. Actually, that's where I was supposed to go. I didn't get to go.
That's pretty neat. A lot of your life is in these books.
If you were to know me as well as I know me, you would see a lot of things that are me, okay? So Walter now has finally told them who they are relative to them, and he introduces them to their mother and their father, and, you don't know whether you want to go out and strangle Walter because he hasn't told them. Yeah. Because they've been there all this time, to 25 years, and they'd go visit him at his estate and never knew that that's his mother in the kitchen, or that's her father. So
the Colorado conspiracy is just the Prague deception continued.
Well, exactly.
But in the States.
Now what happens, you see, now that Rick knows and Liz knows, now he has a little bit more guilt. And so when Walter says, I bought this cattle ranch in Fort Collins, and I want you to go ahead and take care and run it for me. Well, that ends up to be a gigantic thing because a Pawnee Indian starts way back in about 1875, where the Pawnee Indians got cheated out of some land that they originally found gold on, and so on and so on. It's a little bit more exciting than the first book, but it is a continuation, and I bring players in and out as I need them. Okay.
Well, that's a good thing because most movies, the second one doesn't turn out as good as the first one, but yours it gets better as it goes along.
It does get better because certain guys will come into the stories, and then some new guys will come in. For example, in the second one, where he has the cattle ranch in Fort Collins, he owns like 10,000 acres. And he bought it from people who were just using it as an investment and finally decided to get out of it. But here we bring a guy named Aki. Aki is a Japanese guy that was a wrangler. So he convinces Aki to come over to Rhode Island to run his herd because Walter had previously bought 2 restaurants, one in Providence, Rhode Island, and one in Manhattan, where he serves this beef sparingly. And he ends up helping him in on the ranch, okay, because they got cattle there, but the cattle aren't very good. So he comes out and brings a program and says, "Here's what we need to do to fix them up," and so on and so on. Well, he also happens to be a professional assassin, and he was just released from his obligation to this very, very wealthy realtor. Who finally passed away, and the family said, "Well, we really don't need you anymore because new time." But he was a guy that knew all of that assassin stuff and kung fu, and knew how to protect himself, and knew how to use every kind of martial art technique.
So that's interesting. We covered the Prague deception, the Colorado conspiracy. What's the anything on the back burner right now?
Well, the third book is finished. It's called the New Mexico Connection. The New Mexico Connection is Walter just buys a llama ranch in New Mexico, okay, up toward the north end of New Mexico. In the process, and here again, Rick feels a little bit on a guilty side because Walter has done so much for him. He's paid for his tuition and got him to school and done all these kind of things. So he kind of convinces Rick now to go and take care of his llama ranch. In the process, again, Walter, after about a couple of months, gets a call from a friend of his who's in Bolivia, who is a guy who he helped write a document to get him on a tram steamer because he couldn't get out, left over from the concentration camp days also. I don't dwell on the Hitler thing too much other than just kind of touch on it because it's just interesting. It kind of adds something to it.
The period. Yeah, that period then.
And so he says, "Walter, I heard you just bought yourself a ranch in New Mexico." He says, "Yeah, how did you know that?" He says, "Well, long story, but how'd you like to buy my ranch in Bolivia?" And he says, "Well, I got a ranch. I don't know what I'm going to do with 2 ranches." He says, "Well, with me, you're not just buying a ranch. You're going to buy the secret process to taking the wool from the llama and alpaca and being able to make it as smooth as silk." And so now Walter's intrigued because, who wouldn't like to have that kind of a deal, okay? And in it, there's another rancher in New Mexico who is real unhappy that Walter bought the ranch because he was supposed to buy it, and on and on and on and on. But so then Rick and him go to Bolivia and get the ranch, and in the process, the guy does a double take on him. I bring in a new character who is the granddaughter of a General Baryshnikov, okay, left over from Russia. He was killed, but before he was killed, in the first book, he told his granddaughter a lot of things about Walter, his other name, Alfred Berger, and so she finally. Oh, this is in Zurich, Switzerland, by the way. Remember, my books want to go all over the world.
It sounds like they come to the U.S. and they go back out again.
Yeah. So she has now got his vendetta on trying to find Walter and kill him because she figures that he's the one that killed him. Because in the first book, what he did after he was taken away from the concentration camp, the general wanted to have him show him how to make counterfeit money. And he got him drunk, and so he hopped off the train, and that's how he, made this trip to New Orleans and all that. Well, his granddaughter, this is now the third book later, his granddaughter now has graduated from the University of Bern, Switzerland, and she is just dagger eyes on this guy. There's a new company called the Balducci Couture, who is a company residing in Tel Aviv, Israel, that is now got the lock on the fabric market. Just a lot of people don't know it. Now, if you're in a fabric industry, like in the couture industry, all the major dressmakers and clothing stores that are in Milan and Switzerland and L.A. and New York, they know who they are. Well, they're also worked out by a mafia.
Oh, you got the mafia in there too.
It's not mafia. I just make them their. I don't call them the mafia. I call them something else. I forget what it is. Anyway, and so she's really the head of that, and she is a firecracker. Think nothing could pop in you, okay? And so she's in the story, and so she tries to kidnap him, and number one, find out about the secret because the guy never told him. He'd left, and da-da-da-da. So she comes into the story. So anyway, so there's a big action scene toward the end of this here in Tel Aviv, Israel. So.
Wow, there's a lot of books to come.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Well, I'm planning on 15 books.
All right. Well, the Prague Deception sounds really good. I'm gonna have to. Like I said, I started reading that, and it was very easy to read.
I want it to be easy to read. I try not to use big gigantic words because number one, I don't know how to use them properly, and a lot of people have given me the compliment is that this is such an easy book to read. It's difficult to put it down, and a lot of people read it in a couple, 2-3 days.
Yeah, when I got on Amazon, it was 3 pages. I was like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
There. And then the Colorado Conspiracy, and then the
is
third
bigger.
one.
The third one, New Mexico Connection.
Okay. And they can find them all on this site, your website.
Yes.
And, well, there we go. I think that
there's a fourth one I'm in the middle of writing called the Amsterdam Connection, and that really takes place partially in Walter just buys a casino and resort in Johannesburg, South Africa, and somehow he gets involved with this guy who's really the president of Diamond Bourse, which is really located primarily in South Africa because of De Beers and all that.
The diamond.
Yeah, and I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to make this work yet, but
doing a great job. Thank you, Victor.
You're welcome.
All right.